Hello everyone and welcome to an episode of Let's Play with AK featuring me, your host Akukami. In this StarCraft 2 game, we'll be taking a look at a game I played on ladder. This is going to be a TVP matchup on Entombed Valley. Starting off in the 2 o'clock position is me, spawning as the red Terran player. Meanwhile, my opponent Ender has spawned in the 11 o'clock position as the blue Protoss player. Entombed Valley is one of the maps that I videoed for last ladder, and this is actually one of the first times I'm playing on it. Just like Daybreak, I wasn't too familiar with how this map is, so let's take a look at this map, since this is the first time I'm going to be casting on it. There are 4 spawning locations. There's one here, one here, one here, and the 4th one right here. Pretty straightforward. Not too tricky. You have an expansion that leads into here, and you have actually a second ramp that you can guard here, some destructible rocks which you can break down in order to get to this expansion, an expansion right in the middle of any 2 bases, followed by this expansion guarded by destructible rocks that's near the watchtower. And yeah, that's pretty much the map. That's it for all 4 corner bases, and so let's get back into the game. Starting off with my 10 supply depot, followed my 12 racks, and going to be completing this wall off with that supply depot over there. Meanwhile, my opponent Ender has gone for that first pylon, followed by the gateway at the front of his ramp. Probably going for a little bit of a blockade here, and will be sending out his scouting probe in the correct direction. Yes, he will be scouting me in the correct direction. However, he won't get very far as I have already completed my wall off with my other SCV, as I decided to complete this wall off early. Back at my base, just waiting for my racks to finish so that I can upgrade my command center into an orbital, as my opponent, well, he won't get any scouting information except now he knows where I am. Back at my opponent's base, going for his first gas, and cybernetics core, also at the front of his ramp. Going for a miniature wall up here, probably going to be placing units here, and maybe here if you can squeeze one in there. Going for a zealot first, choosing not to go for a stalker first, not chrono boosting anything out at the moment, except probes, I guess. No. Oh, there we go. Chrono boosting out probes. Meanwhile, back at my base, I've gone for that gasless 1 racks fast expand. I've set my expansion already at my natural as I stream down my marines to guard the entrance to both of my bases. Back at my base, setting up my second racks, going to be following that up probably with another racks sometime in the near future. And well, back at my opponent's base, going for that second gateway and just hanging out with his zealot. Also taking control of the center of the map while I send out my SCV scout in the wrong direction, deciding to scout clockwise, and will be some time before I discover where my opponent is. Taking my second gas, following, putting my racks down first and following that up with my second gas. Meanwhile, going to be placing a bunker in the front of my bases so that I can hold off any early aggression. Back at my opponent's base, chrono boosting out that warp gate research, as it's very important when trying to put pressure on your opponent. You can excuse me, you can warp in your units near your pylon, and yeah, just the power of Protoss macro that goes that way. Meanwhile, coming down with that robotics facility while taking a second gas, going to be completing my command center at my natural and upgrading to an orbital, trying to saturate this as quickly as I can, not putting my marines in the bunker. There we go. Taking gas 1 and 2, correctly saturating these, even though I only have 2 per gas at the moment. I do want to save up for some more facilities. I'm going to be following my 3 racks up with some tech lab and a reactor on my racks, followed by a factory, which is right here, coming soon. There we go. Going to be following up with the factory as I chase down my opponent's probe that was holding this watchtower, not realizing where my SCV scout was, and having it die to the forces in the front of my opponent's base. My opponent is coming out with that first immortal, probably expecting to break down whatever. Uh, excuse me again. I should really bring some water when I do my casting. Probably going to be trying to break down the front wall with my marines and my bunkers. Meanwhile, also setting up his first expansion, second base. Going to be following that up with 2 pylons, as I missed my opponent's third gateway. I apologize for that. Meanwhile, back at my base, setting up a command center. My third base, second expansion. Meanwhile, trying to build a starport to tech up to those double medevacs, as I will be dropping a extra supply here. I don't know what to call that exactly. Going to be following this up with hopefully a reactor on my factory soon. Where's that reactor? There it is. Anyways, continuing to produce up, and my opponent moves his forces down to between the ramps, trying to hold off that front of the ramp. Meanwhile, my opponent sends out his SCV probe back to my base in an attempt to do some scouting, but will be subsequently denied very quickly, very painfully. I don't know. Can probes feel that? I don't know. Well, anyways, coming out with an observer, and we'll be using that to scout my base, of course. Silently, undetected, and cloaked. Meanwhile, finishing up my reactor, going to be placing my starport on my reactor, and setting out my factory to scout out his tech at his base. Am I going in that direction? Well, I think I am. Well, anyways, bringing down my 4th barracks, researching stim and combat shield, coming out with that stim research first before my combat shield, as I do like to have stim available when I engage my opponent. Coming out with my 3rd refinery at my natural, following that up with 2 engineering bays, also at my natural. Meanwhile, my opponent is just continuing to macro up back at his base, and 4 production facilities, 5 production facilities. Not doing too great on macroing. Yeah, I harp on that, but you know, my macro isn't that great either. So, well, at least I recognize when when my opponents are not macroing well. Anyways, back at my base, forgetting to put an attachment on this barracks. Probably going to be ending up putting a tech lab in there, as I do like to go for mid-game marauders just to hold off any aggression and early colossi that might appear in the front of my base. Meanwhile, my opponent sending his observer scout to the front of my base will be catching where my forces are as I salvage both of my bunkers. Also checking out to see if I have an expansion, which he probably already knew that I had. Meanwhile, doing some scouting with my factory, scouting out that he does indeed have a gateway here and a robotics bay right here, going for that colossi, as I recognize this. And what's my response to this? Well, supply blocked. Supply blocked, coming out with those 2 medevacs. I should probably be coming out with some Vikings, but that's okay. Oh, I actually had 3 medevacs, and my opponent spots where I am with his observer and will be silently following where I am. Meanwhile, back at my opponent's base, continuing to macro up, and coming out with that extended thermal lance range for his colossi, and 1 colossi is not producing, still only on 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, yeah. Only still on 4 unit production facilities. Meanwhile, I'm trying to spend my money as fast as I can, building 3 more racks, and actually changing my 3rd command center into an orbital command as I go and engage my opponent at the front of his base. He sees this coming, of course, because his observer scout is right there, and I scan just to check what he has at the front of his base, holding off my aggression for the time being, also scanning to see if there's an observer there, which I do catch with that scan. Meanwhile, back at my base, I've rallied my forces to this location here, I believe. Do I? Oh, actually rallying to the front of my opponent's base, expecting some aggression in there, and trying to send my reinforcements to the front of my base in case I did engage right there, forgetting to establish that rally point. Yeah, just hanging out in the middle of the map with my forces and just continuing to macro up. My forces are 1-1 upgrades. Meanwhile, my opponent has no upgrades, and will be building more pylons in his base, trying his best not to get supply blocked, as he is supply blocked at the moment. Coming out with 2 forges, and will be researching that ground armor level 1 upgrade and that weapons upgrade. Following this up with 2 more gateways, going to be changing those into gateways as my opponent moves out, but I do scan this coming and decide to engage this because I already have my Vikings out, and see that he only has 1 Colossi, and with his force microing backwards, going for that Colossus as he shoots down my Vikings with his Stalkers, but there's nothing to protect this 1 Colossus as he is in the red. Scanning to see if there's any more incoming forces as I go for it. Also remembering to actually break down these destructible rocks to this base and saturate this location here, and moving my 3rd command center over there. Meanwhile, continuing up my opponent's rep, scanning, and he holds me off with some sentries, but my Vikings manage to make it through as they are flying units and are not affected by this force field, taking down that 1 Colossus and just ripping through his forces. Marauders shooting these zealots as they warp in, and yeah, my opponent doesn't have too many reinforcing units as he is only on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 unit producing facilities, and because of this his lack of macro and not having enough production facilities, that's game. I don't have really too many critical moments in this game because it was pretty straightforward. The one thing that I will note in this game is that my opponent's macro compared to mine wasn't as great, and because of that he wasn't able to produce enough forces to take my army head on. And as you can see here, I did have enough forces to overwhelm what he had at the time being. And if you watch the replay and just go back and look at his production facilities, you will see that he was only on 7 or 8 production facilities, and that doesn't really cut it. As you can see, my opponent's minerals are climbing high. I know I'm harping on my opponent's macro and everything, and my macro isn't that great, but this as a lower level league player is one of the things that I've been trying to work on. I've been telling you viewers that I've been trying to work on my macro as opposed to everything else, my micro even a little bit, but again, it all goes back to macro. That wraps it up for this game. Please subscribe if you like my content and videos, subscribe to my channel, thumbs up and like this video, and as always, thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you in another episode of Let's Play with AK.